Silence is a language in itself. It's not empty. It's full of meaning and tension and power for those who know how to use it. When a leader chooses not to respond, not to engage, not to throw words into the storm, it is not always because they have nothing to say. In fact, it is often because they have too much to say, too much at stake, and too much wisdom to throw it all away in a moment of emotional reaction. The world is quick to mistake quietness for weakness. But that's because most people have never learned the discipline it takes to restrain the tongue when every nerve in the body wants to speak. Think about it. How many times in history have leaders destroyed their credibility because they reacted too soon, too rashly, without fully understanding the gravity of their words? A sentence spoken in haste can turn into a headline that defines an entire career, and that's a risk some are simply not willing to take. Silence creates space, space for observation, space for reflection, space for gathering strength. In that space, a leader can watch the pieces move on the board without revealing their next step. That's the kind of restraint most people will never understand, because most people live in a world where talking is seen as action and quiet is mistaken for doing nothing. But in the realm of diplomacy and high-level leadership, silence is sometimes the loudest statement you can make. When the crowd is expecting a roar and instead they hear nothing, the absence of sound forces them to pay attention even more. Questions start swirling. The imagination starts running. That vacuum gets filled with speculation. And speculation is a powerful tool in the hands of those who know how to control it. We live in a time where instant communication has made everyone impatient for answers. Social media demands responses in seconds, and public opinion forms in minutes. But true influence doesn't bend to the speed of the internet. It moves at the speed of strategy. Silence gives you the upper hand in that game. It frustrates the opposition, it unsettles the critics, and it keeps your real thoughts protected. When you speak, your words can be dissected, twisted, and weaponized. But when you choose not to speak, no one knows what to attack. And that uncertainty can be more powerful than any argument you could make. It's also important to understand that silence is not passive, it's active. It's a deliberate choice that takes awareness and control. Imagine being accused, challenged, provoked, and yet sitting back without flinching, without letting your emotions dictate your moves. That's not weakness. That's mastery over self. The strongest voices in history didn't speak every time they had an opinion. They spoke when it mattered most and when their words could carry maximum impact. Until then, they let silence work for them like an invisible shield. The truth is, silence forces people to reveal themselves. When you don't answer a question, you're not dodging it. You're allowing the one who asked it to show their real motives. You let them talk more, push more, expose more of what they're really after. It's like in negotiations, sometimes the smartest thing you can do after the other side makes an offer is to say nothing. That pause will make them uncomfortable. They'll start filling it with concessions, explanations, and adjustments, all because they can't handle the quiet. That's when you win without lifting a finger. Leaders who understand the power of silence are playing a different game than the rest of the world. They're not trying to win arguments. They're trying to win the long-term outcome. That requires patience. It requires knowing that not every challenge is a response and not every critic needs an answer. In fact, answering too often can dilute your authority. The more you speak, the more you give away. But if you're selective, if you reserve your voice for the moments that truly matter, when you do speak, the world will stop to listen. Silence can also be a mirror, reflecting the chaos of others. When you stand still, you can see who's running in circles, who's shouting to fill the void, who's desperate for your attention. And in that stillness, you learn more about them than you ever could by engaging in back and forth debates. That's why the most strategic leaders know that sometimes the most powerful thing they can do in the face of a question, even a shocking or provocative one, is to stay silent. It lets the weight of the question settle in, not just on them, but on everyone listening. It shifts the focus from the answer to the implications. And often, those implications are louder than anything that could be said out loud. When someone holds a position of immense responsibility, their voice is not just their own. It represents an entire office, a nation, or even a global stance. Every syllable they utter carries weight far beyond the moment. This is why those in such positions cannot afford to speak casually or impulsively. Their words have the power to influence markets, shape international relations, and alter the trajectory of events that millions of people depend on. One careless statement could cause a diplomatic rift, unsettle an ally, or embolden an adversary. That's the reality of high-level leadership. The stakes are never small, and the consequences are never limited to the room in which the words are spoken. In that environment, speech becomes a tool that must be handled with precision. You cannot throw it around recklessly. You cannot treat every question as something you must immediately answer. The higher your position, the more your voice becomes a lever. Pull it too soon and the system moves in ways you can't control. Leaders must recognize that sometimes the safest, most responsible choice is to wait to observe, to allow emotions to cool before making any public declaration. This is not a matter of avoiding the truth. It's about protecting the integrity of the role and the stability of the systems that depend on it. People often fail to understand this because they view communication from the perspective of ordinary life, in everyday situations. Quick responses are seen as a sign of honesty and transparency, but in positions of massive influence, quick responses can be reckless. When you are responsible for representing a country stance or a critical organization's position, you cannot think only about what you want to say. You must think about how your words will ripple across borders, across media platforms, and across the minds of millions who will interpret them through their own filters and biases. The weight of responsibility also changes the way you process information. A leader cannot simply react to the information they have at the moment. They must consider classified intelligence, ongoing negotiations, and sensitive details that the public may never be aware of. These hidden factors can make speaking prematurely dangerous. Imagine revealing even a small piece of sensitive information in a moment of pressure. It could compromise operations, undermine partnerships, or give opponents an advantage they would not otherwise have. For someone in such a position, silence is not about withholding truth. It's about safeguarding far greater truths that must remain protected for the greater good. And this is where the real discipline comes in. The higher your responsibility, the harder it becomes to balance public expectation with strategic necessity. The public often wants immediate answers, clear statements, and visible action. But leadership is not about satisfying impatience. It's about making decisions that will stand the test of time. That means resisting the urge to satisfy the moment at the expense of the future. Those who understand this principle carry themselves with a calm, deliberate energy. They are not swayed by the noise of the moment because they know their role is not to win today's headline, but to secure tomorrow's outcome. Another element of this responsibility is that words from someone in authority can be weaponized by others. A statement made in one context can be clipped, edited, or reframed to serve someone else's agenda. The heavier your position, the more attractive your words become to those who wish to manipulate them. This makes careful speech not just wise, but essential. Silence becomes a shield, one that prevents others from twisting your voice into something you never intended. The weight of responsibility also demands that leaders consider not just their own reputation, but the image of the entire body they represent. In the case of a nation's top diplomat, their words are not heard as personal opinions. They are interpreted as official policy. This means a single statement could redefine alliances, unsettle negotiations, or embolden critics. The responsibility is not just heavy, it's constant. There is no off switch, no casual moment where words don't matter. That is why silence used intentionally is often a sign of strength, not weakness. The public may view such silence as avoidance, but in reality, it is often a conscious act of service. It is a choice to prioritize stability over sensation, to guard delicate situations until they can be addressed in a way that minimizes risk and maximizes benefit. A leader who understands the weight of their role knows that they cannot speak for personal comfort. They must speak only when it serves the mission, the vision, and the people they represent every time they open their mouth. They are not just speaking, they are shaping the course of events. It's easy to underestimate how exhausting this level of responsibility can be. Every conversation, every press conference, every offhand remark is filtered through layers of analysis, protocol, and strategic foresight. The leader is constantly aware that the world is watching, recording, and judging. They are aware that enemies are listening for weaknesses, allies are listening for reassurance, and the public is listening for clarity. One wrong tone, one misplaced phrase can send the wrong message to all three at once. This is why restraint becomes second nature. Speaking less is not an accident. It's the outcome of deep awareness about the cost of every word. Timing is one of the most underrated elements of communication, yet it is one of the most powerful. In the world of leadership, diplomacy, and high-stakes decision-making, timing can be the difference between creating impact and creating chaos. Speaking too soon can disrupt delicate negotiations, close doors that were just beginning to open, or escalate tensions before solutions have been fully formed. On the other hand, waiting too long can make a leader seem disconnected, indifferent, or out of touch with the urgency of the moment. The art lies in finding the exact moment when words will land with maximum effect and minimum collateral damage. Great leaders understand that the right message delivered at the wrong time can be as harmful as the wrong message delivered at the right time. Timing requires patience, observation, and a deep understanding of the environment. It demands that a leader not only listen to what is being said, but also pay attention to the unsaid, the shifts in mood, the subtle signals, the way people move, react, or stay still. It's about reading the room, reading the opponent, reading the world. Only when you have a clear understanding of the landscape can you choose the moment when your words will cut through the noise instead of getting lost in it. There's also a strategic advantage to delaying your response. When a leader holds back, they allow the situation to reveal more of itself. In the first moments after an event, emotions run high, narratives form quickly, and misinformation can spread. Jumping into that storm too soon means you risk reacting to half-truths or falsehoods. But if you wait, facts emerge, positions become clear, and the noise begins to settle. This gives you the opportunity to speak from a position of clarity rather than confusion. It also allows your words to carry authority because they are based on a fuller understanding of the truth. Timing is also about knowing when the audience is most ready to listen. Sometimes the message is urgent, but the listener's mind is not open. In such cases, pushing the message too soon can cause resistance, defensiveness, or outright rejection. Waiting until the audience is prepared, until they have experienced enough of the situation to see the value of your perspective, ensures that your words land with far greater force. This is especially true in politics and diplomacy, where convincing others often matters more than simply being right. There's a rhythm to events much like music. Every crisis, every negotiation, every political moment has a tempo. A skilled leader can sense when that tempo is speeding up, slowing down, or reaching a critical point. Speaking in sync with that rhythm makes your message feel natural and inevitable, as if it was the truth everyone was waiting to hear. But speaking out of sync makes it feel forced, rushed, or irrelevant. That's why timing is not just a matter of holding back. It's about moving in harmony with the flow of events. Another dimension of timing is its psychological impact on others. When someone waits to speak, it creates anticipation. People start wondering what they will say, when they will say it, and what position they will take. This anticipation can build pressure. And when the leader finally speaks, the message hits with far more weight than it would have if it had been rushed out immediately. In this way, timing can be used not only to protect your own position, but also to shape the emotional state of your audience. In the context of answering a public challenge or question, perfect timing can flip the entire narrative. If you answer too quickly, you might play into the other person's strategy. But if you let them speak, let them repeat their challenge, let them reveal their hand, you can respond at the moment when their argument is most exposed. This is not evasion, it's strategic patience. It's the understanding that your response will be far more powerful when it dismantles the opponent's position at its weakest point rather than engaging it at its strongest. Timing also involves knowing when to break silence. Because silence is powerful, but indefinite silence can be misinterpreted. The leader must choose the moment when silence has done its work, when it has created space, gathered information, built anticipation, and then step in with a message that shifts the direction of the conversation. That shift is most effective when it feels intentional, like the leader has been in control of the timeline all along, rather than being pushed into a corner. Mastering timing means embracing the discipline of waiting without drifting into inaction. It means having the courage to hold back when everyone is demanding answers, and the courage to step forward when the moment calls for it. The greatest communicators in history were not just great because of what they said. They were great because of when they said it. They understood that words are not static. They gain or lose power depending on the moment in which they are spoken. In leadership, that understanding can be the difference between a fleeting statement and a defining moment. Every move a leader makes is part of a larger strategy, and silence is no exception. People often assume that speaking is the main way to exert influence, but in reality, silence can be one of the most calculated and intentional tools in a leader's arsenal. What the public sees is only a fraction of what is really happening. Behind closed doors, there are meetings, negotiations, and back-channel discussions that the average person will never know about. Silence in public often means there's a great deal of noise happening in private, but it is noise directed towards specific goals and carefully managed outcomes. When a leader chooses to remain quiet in the face of a direct question or public challenge, it is rarely because they have nothing to say. More often, it is because revealing their thoughts prematurely would compromise the bigger picture. In politics and diplomacy, there are always multiple games being played at once. There is the public game, what the media reports, what the citizens see, and then there is the private game where the real power plays unfold. Speaking too early can give away your hand, allowing opponents to prepare counter moves or sabotage your efforts before they are complete. By staying silent, a leader preserves their flexibility and keeps their true intentions hidden until the moment they choose to reveal them. This hidden strategy also has the advantage of forcing others to move first. Silence creates discomfort, especially in adversaries who are trying to provoke a reaction. When a leader refuses to respond, the other side is left to guess what they are thinking. This uncertainty can cause them to overplay their position, make hasty statements, or commit to strategies that can later be turned against them. In this way, silence becomes a kind of trap. It invites the opposition to expose themselves while the leader remains protected. There's also a psychological element to this. In any negotiation or conflict, the person who speaks first often gives away more information than they intended. They reveal their priorities, their fears, and their level of preparedness. By staying quiet, a leader forces others to reveal themselves first. It's a form of information gathering where every word the other side says becomes a data point that can be used later to craft a more precise and effective response. A hidden strategy also requires thinking in terms of long-term positioning. Public opinion is often shaped by the first statement that comes out after a major event, but it is also shaped by what comes later, the statements that provide closure, resolution, or decisive direction. A leader who remains silent at the outset may be doing so to avoid becoming part of the initial noise. saving their voice for the moment when they can deliver a message that reframes the entire narrative. This is not passivity. It is the deliberate conservation of influence for the point of maximum impact. Silence can also be a protective measure for allies and relationships. In international relations, speaking too soon or too bluntly can put pressure on allies who are not ready to take a public stand. By holding back, a leader gives partners the space to manage their own positions without forcing them into a premature public alignment. This kind of patience can strengthen alliances rather than strain them, making the eventual joint statement or coordinated action more powerful and united. Furthermore, a leader's silence can be part of a signaling strategy. In diplomacy, what is not said is sometimes more important than what is said. By withholding comments, a leader can send a subtle message that they are not yet satisfied, that they are watching, that they expect certain changes before they will engage. This creates a form of pressure that does not come through direct confrontation, but through the awareness that the leader's eventual response will matter greatly and that it has not yet been given. A hidden strategy also considers the audience beyond the immediate situation. A public statement is not just heard by the people it is addressed to. It is heard by allies, adversaries, neutral parties, and future historians. Every word becomes part of the record. Silence, on the other hand, is open to interpretation, and that ambiguity can be useful. It allows different groups to project their own meanings onto it, keeping multiple possibilities alive at once. This can be a strategic advantage, especially when the leader needs to keep several diplomatic channels open without committing too firmly in any direction. In high-stakes situations, the leader who speaks the least often controls the flow of events the most. They are not reacting to the energy of others. They are directing it. The opposition moves based on guesses. The media speculates endlessly, and the public waits. In that waiting, the leader is free to prepare, to adjust, and to ensure that when they finally speak, their message will not be just another voice in the crowd, but the one that changes the course of the discussion. That kind of control is not an accident. It is the product of a hidden strategy that values patience, observation, and precision over impulse, noise, and reaction. What the public sees is rarely the full picture. Every statement made by a leader is judged through the lens of public perception, but behind that perception is a private reality that very few people will ever understand. In the world of politics, diplomacy, and leadership, the gap between what is visible and what is actually happening can be enormous. This is why silence can appear one way to the public while serving an entirely different purpose behind the scenes. To the outside world, a leader's lack of response might seem like hesitation, avoidance, or even weakness. But in private, that same silence could be part of a highly coordinated plan involving confidential briefings, secure communication, and delicate operations that cannot be exposed without risking greater harm. The challenge for any leader is that they are constantly walking a fine line between public expectation and operational necessity. The public wants answers, clarity, and transparency. But in high-stakes situations, giving those answers too soon can backfire. Sometimes the truth cannot be shared yet, not because it is being hidden for selfish reasons, but because revealing it prematurely could compromise safety, diplomacy, or strategic advantage. A leader who understands this knows that the perception of silence is a small price to pay compared to the damage that could come from speaking too soon. Public perception is often driven by emotion. People want to feel informed, reassured, and included, especially during moments of uncertainty or tension. When those needs are not met, frustration grows. Critics and commentators seize the opportunity to fill the silence with their own interpretations, often painting the leader as disengaged or indecisive. This is where the private reality becomes even more important, because while the public narrative might be running wild, the leader may be deeply engaged in behind-the-scenes work that is far more critical than managing appearances. They might be in constant contact with advisors, gathering intelligence, assessing risks, and negotiating with multiple parties at once. None of that is visible to the cameras, but it is the real work that determines outcomes. The private reality also involves factors that cannot be made public for security reasons. In diplomacy, sensitive information is often classified not because it is unimportant, but because it is too important to risk falling into the wrong hands. A single public statement could reveal strategic intentions, intelligence sources, or operational timelines. Leaders know that once information is spoken aloud in a public setting, it is no longer controllable, can be analyzed, exploited, and weaponized by anyone who hears it. Silence in such cases is a form of protection, not only for the leader's position, but for the people and interests they represent. Another layer to this is the fact that public perception can be managed, but not entirely controlled. The media plays a massive role in shaping how silence is interpreted. News outlets, political opponents, and commentators will often spin a lack of response into a narrative that fits their own agenda. A leader cannot stop this entirely, but they can choose not to feed it. By staying silent, they deny others the ammunition that could come from a rushed or poorly timed statement. They allow the noise to swirl without adding to it, conserving their influence for a moment when it can truly shift the conversation. It is also worth noting that the private reality is often far more complex than the public realizes. While the public might see an issue as a single event or a clear choice, the leader may be balancing multiple interconnected factors. They might be weighing how a statement will affect not just the immediate situation, but also ongoing negotiations in unrelated areas, the stability of alliances, the confidence of investors, or the morale of internal teams. Speaking publicly on one issue could unintentionally trigger consequences in another area. Creating ripple effects are difficult to control. This is why silence can sometimes be the safest move, not because there is nothing to say, but because saying something could disrupt a much larger, more fragile balance. The tension between perception and reality is one of the most difficult parts of leadership. A leader has to accept that they will sometimes be misunderstood in the moment. They have to resist the temptation to defend themselves immediately, knowing that the truth may only be revealed much later, if at all. This requires a level of patience and discipline that goes against human nature, especially in an age where quick responses are valued over thoughtful ones. But leaders who understand the long game know that the measure of their effectiveness is not in how they are perceived in a single moment, but in the results they deliver over time. Behind the scenes, silence can be filled with activity, planning, and decisive action that will never make it into the headlines. It is the quiet work, the discreet phone calls, the private meetings, the careful coordination that often makes the biggest difference. The public might never see it, but it is in that hidden space between perception and reality where the real leadership happens. A well-placed question can shift the entire balance of a conversation, a debate, or even a political climate. When someone like Jairam Ramesh'S poses a provocative question, it is not just a request for information. It is a move on the chessboard. Questions like that are designed to draw a response, to create urgency, to force the other party into revealing their stance. But a wise leader knows that not every question deserves an immediate answer. In fact, the ability to decide when and how to respond is what turns a question from a potential trap into a powerful opportunity. When you are under public scrutiny, every response you give is not just about the words, it's about the timing, the tone, the context, and the broader narrative it supports. If you answer too quickly, you may be stepping directly in the frame the questioner has built for you. They have set the terms of engagement, and you are simply playing your role in their script. But if you hold back, if you let the question linger unanswered, you change the dynamics. You deny the questioner control over the timing and tone of the exchange, and instead, you create space for your own strategy to unfold. This approach works because a question left unanswered begins to work on people's minds. The public starts to debate it. Supporters and critics begin to fill in their own interpretations. The conversation expands beyond the original context, and in that expansion, new angles emerge. Angles the original questioner may not have anticipated. By waiting, a leader can observe how the discussion evolves, how different groups react, and how the balance of opinion shifts. This allows them to choose a moment to respond that maximizes impact and minimizes vulnerability. Turning a question into a power move also means recognizing the underlying motive behind it. Every pointed question has intent. It may be to expose, to provoke, to unsettle, or to force alignment. By identifying that motive, a leader can decide whether responding directly would serve the other person's purpose or disrupt it. Sometimes the most effective way to handle a loaded question is to leave it hanging, letting the questioner stew in their own strategy until it loses momentum. Other times the leader may choose to answer, but only after reframing the question in a way that shifts the power dynamic entirely. This is where patience becomes a weapon. In a public setting, people expect immediacy. When a leader refuses to provide it, they project an image of control. It signals that they are not being pulled into someone else's game, that they are operating on their own timeline. This frustrates opponents because it means they cannot dictate a type of engagement. It also unsettles the media, which thrives on quick, reactive sound bites. Without that instant response, the story loses some of its urgency, buying the leader more time to prepare a calculated reply. There is also a psychological effect on the audience. When a leader takes their time to answer a question, it gives the impression that their words are worth waiting for. It builds anticipation and heightens the importance of the eventual statement. This is especially powerful if the leader has a reputation for speaking only when it matters. Because when they finally do respond, the audience knows they are about to hear something that has been carefully considered, not something said in the heat of the moment. A well-timed response can also flip the narrative entirely. Imagine allowing a question to circulate for days, letting critics speculate, letting opponents commit themselves to certain arguments, and then delivering an answer that dismantles all of it at once. In that moment, the question no longer belongs to the one who asked it. It becomes part of the leader's message, serving their agenda instead of the challenger's. This is how a potential attack can be turned into an asset. Even more strategically, a leader can use silence in the face of a question to make others reveal themselves in the absence of a direct answer. Different factions will try to interpret or predict what the leader will say. Allies may rally in defense, opponents may overstate their case, and in doing so, both sides may expose information or weaknesses. By the time the leader speaks, they are walking into a landscape that has already shifted in their favor. The truth is, questions are not just requests for clarity. They are moves in a game of influence. And in that game, the one who controls the tempo and framing of responses often controls the outcome. Turning a question into a power move requires resisting the urge to react instantly, analyzing the deeper intent behind it, and responding only when the moment will yield the greatest advantage. This is why some leaders remain silent at first, not to avoid the question, but to ensure that when they do answer, the impact is felt far beyond the conversation in which it was asked.